Have you ever felt trapped between what you want and what your family expects of you? It's an internal battle that many people face in silence. When the weight of sacrifice falls on your shoulders, the question that echoes in your mind is it worth giving up your dreams to protect the ones you love? Maybe you felt like choosing between love for your family and love for yourself. It's a cruel dilemma that can consume your soul and, at the same time, redefine the meaning of love and sacrifice. But what no one tells you is that these difficult moments can hide an opportunity. It's not an easy or obvious opportunity, but something that can transform not only your family, but also yourself. Isabella, as you'll see, learned this the hard way. The price she paid for her sacrifice seemed too high, until she saw what she was really building. And perhaps, by understanding this story, you too will find the answers to the sacrifices you've already made, or will still have to make. Isabella grew up surrounded by everything that many called luxury. The accommodation where she lived felt more like a palace, and the constant sound of laughter at family dinners filled the hallways. The family's luxury furniture company was a symbol of tradition and success, renowned for its elegance. From an early age, she was taught to value money, but also love and family loyalty. However, something was troubling her. Even with so much comfort, her heart yearned for something that money could not buy. Isabella's dream was more vibrant than the shine of her mother's jewelry. She saw herself in Paris, walking through streets full of history, learning the art of design. Her hands wanted to create, shape, give life to what only existed in her imagination. But in her family, ambitions outside the business throne were seen as capricious. How could she explain that her love for art was as strong as her love for the company? And therein lay the dilemma. Follow her heart or follow her legacy? Joachim, her father, was a strict man, but not heartless. He believed that every decision he made was made out of love for his family, even when it was hard. He insisted that Isabella should prepare herself to lead the company. After all, the empire could not fall into the hands of someone who did not understand its value. Don't you see, daughter? We are more than rich, we are a symbol, an example. But how could she explain to him that the symbol she wanted to be was someone else? Even though he was a particular father, Joachim had his weaknesses, and Isabella knew that. Sometimes, during a casual conversation, she would try to show her passion for design. Dad, what if the company had a special line signed by me? Something I could create with love, from scratch. He would laugh, tapping the table lightly. Who would want that, Isabella? What we have works. Don't risk the certain for the doubtful. That was the pattern. Always logic, never the dream. Isabella found solace in her moments alone, scribbling in a notebook that she hid in the back of the drawer. They were bold, modern, almost utopian drawings. When I looked at those pages, it was as if I were touching a small flame of hope. But I knew that it was just an escape. Will they ever understand me? She asked herself. In the meantime, she remained in the role she had been given. The perfect daughter, prepared for a future she did not want. There was, however, something that no one could take away from her. Her vision. Isabella was a born observer. She noticed the details that others ignored. At formal family dinners, she heard conversations about economics and strategies, but she also saw the tense looks between her father and mother. Something was changing in the family dynamics, but no one talked about it. Still, she knew the pressure was mounting, and it could end up falling on her. Isabella's desire for freedom grew stronger every day, but the chains of family duty were also tightening. She was like a tree planted in a luxurious garden, but dreaming of spreading its roots beyond those walls. And what she didn't know yet was that the changes that were coming would transform everything. Her choices, her ambitions, and most importantly, her vision of love and sacrifice. The family furniture factory, which for decades had been synonymous with prosperity, began to feel the first tremors. Times had changed, and with them, consumer tastes. Joachim, a man accustomed to leading with firmness, now found himself faced with frightening numbers. He spent sleepless nights analyzing charts, calling old partners and trying to find a way out. In his mind, saving the company was not just a financial challenge, but a matter of honor and love for his family. Joachim had always believed he was immune to market uncertainties. After all, with so much money accumulated and a solid legacy, what could go wrong? But reality showed otherwise. Competition was fierce, and furniture that was once a desirable object was now obsolete for the new public. He couldn't understand. How could something so well made be ignored? That's when we realized that the problem wasn't just the product, but a lack of innovation. Amidst the chaos, a bold idea emerged: to join forces with another influential family, the Albuquerques. Joachim believed that a marriage between Isabella and Eduardo, the Albuquerque heirs, could be the perfect solution. For him, this alliance would be a masterstroke, guaranteeing money and influence. But deep down, he knew that it would involve sacrifice. As a father, it was hard to imagine Isabella accepting such a marriage. As a businessman, he felt he had no other choice. Eduardo Albuquerque was the typical heir to an empire: charismatic, wealthy, and impeccably behaved. Joachim saw him as the ideal partner to save the business. But did Eduardo also see a union as something strategic or as a burden? Joachim first convinced everyone that this was the best solution. However, deep down, he knew he was asking more than just a decision from his daughter. He was asking for a piece of her freedom. A conversation with Isabella was one of the most tense moments in Joachim's life. He called her to his office, the same one where she once played drawing on the floor while working. "Daughter, I know this may seem difficult, but we are at a crucial moment. The future of our family depends on you." His words sounded firm, but there was a tone of pleading in them. He was not just a businessman at that moment. He was a desperate father. Isabella listened to everything in silence, her heart aching. She wanted to scream, to say that this was unfair, that her life was not up for negotiation. But Joachim's gaze said more than his words. He was aging too quickly, and the shadow of failure seemed to devour him. At that moment, she realized that he was not the unshakable millionaire everyone imagined. He was just a man trying to protect what he loved. And so, the decision hung in the air, like a storm coming to blow. Joachim knew he had placed an enormous weight on Isabella's shoulders. But he also knew that the most difficult choices in life usually involve sacrifice. What he could not have foreseen was how this choice would transform not only the company, but also the bond between father and daughter. Isabella felt the weight of the proposal as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Her father's request was not only a sacrifice, but a renunciation of what she believed to be her essence. The love for her family made her reconsider everything she had ever dreamed of. There was something cruelly ironic in the situation. While she dreamed of creating, now she was forced to accept something that would destroy her inside. But how could she say no when her father's gaze seemed to carry a cry for help? Accepting the marriage required giving up Paris, her design classes, and perhaps her own identity. However, Isabella was a practical woman, even if it cost her heart. She remembered the nights when Joachim would put her to sleep, telling her stories about how he started the business with just a dream. If he sacrificed so much, why shouldn't I, she thought. It was as if the love she felt for her family had the power to silence her own desires. The announcement of the decision was made at a family dinner, where the atmosphere was heavier than usual. Isabella, with a trembling voice, said, "I accept." Her mother, visibly moved, held her hand under the table. Joachim, although relieved, showed no joy. It was as if everyone knew that this was more of a battle than a victory. And Isabella felt, for the first time, that the family money was like a golden weight that everyone carried. Her fiancé and Eduardo became the center of attention. Parties were planned, and newspapers were full of headlines about the union of two powerful families. But inside Isabella, there was a storm of emotions. She found herself looking at her sketchbook hidden in the back of her drawer, wondering if she would ever have the courage to live for herself. Hope was small but persistent, like a flame that refused to go out. Eduardo, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to what all this meant to Isabella. They barely knew each other, and their conversations were brief and superficial. Despite being polite and charming, he did not fill the void she felt. Does he understand what he is betting on? Isabella wondered. It was as if they were both being carried away by a current that she could not control. But even so, she maintained her composure, determined not to show weakness. Isabella's sacrifice was not only personal, it was also public. The company's employees looked on in admiration, as if she were everyone's savior. Friends from high society praised her courage, without realizing how empty those words sounded. Isabella smiled in public, but cried in silence. And, in that sense, she began to understand that the true weight of money was in everything it could not solve. As the wedding preparations progressed, Isabella began to realize something subtle but significant. The sacrifice she made was not only a sacrifice, it was also a seed. Perhaps, in the midst of all that pain, something new could be born. She just didn't know what it would be, or if she would have the strength to wait. But as life always shows, answers often appear when you least expect them. Isabella's wedding day was a spectacle worthy of a fairy tale. The ceremony, held in a noble cathedral, brought together businessmen, politicians, and influential figures. But, for Isabella, it seemed more like theater than a special moment. As she walked down the aisle, she felt as if each step was taking her away from herself. The sparkle of the jewels and the smiles of the guests contrasted with the emptiness that was growing inside her. Eduardo was waiting at the altar, impeccable in his tailored suit. He looked like a prince, but the truth was that Isabella didn't see him that way. The words "in sickness and in health" echoed like a bitter irony, because deep down, she knew there was no love between them. "We are here because we are obligated," she said. And yet, she said yes firmly, as if that act were her last show of strength. The reception was even more grand. Champagne flowed like water, and classical music filled the room. Everyone wanted to congratulate the couple, praising how they made a perfect couple. Isabella smiled mechanically, while Eduardo maintained his polite posture. But, in a moment of solitude in the corner of the room, she looked around and asked herself, "Does anyone here really care about what I'm feeling?" In the first months after their wedding, Isabella and Eduardo's routine was marked by formalities. Social dinners, business meetings, and planned trips filled their days. Despite sharing the same roof, silence between them was constant. Eduardo, although polite, seemed distant, as if he were as weighed down by the weight of that wedding ring as she was. Isabella began to wonder if this was what money could buy, a marriage that was perfect on the outside and empty on the inside. Even in the midst of the coldness of the relationship, Isabella tried to find small moments of rupture. She began to draw again, using her free time to scribble ideas in a notebook that she now carried with her. It was her refuge, her way of reminding herself of who she was. "If all I can have is this, then so be it," she thought. But with each new drawing, she felt a growing desire for something more, something that seemed out of reach. Eduardo, on the other hand, began to notice Isabella's discomfort. One night, while they were alone in the great hall of the house, he began to start a conversation. "Are you happy here?" he asked, breaking the silence. Isabella hesitated, but answered honestly, "I don't know what it means to be happy in this context." It was the first time he saw how lost she was, and at that moment, something in him changed too. The forced coexistence made small gestures begin to emerge. Eduardo, previously so indifferent, began to observe Isabella more closely. He noticed how she held her pencil when drawing, or how her gaze wandered when listening to certain songs. Without realizing it, a subtle connection began to form between them. But Isabella still carried her doubts, unsure if that was real or just an illusion amidst the chaos. Eduardo had always been a practical man, shaped by his family's expectations and the responsibility of maintaining the Albuquerque legacy. He began his marriage with Isabella as if he had signed a contract, something necessary, but without any emotion. However, over the months, he began to notice something in Isabella that he had never noticed before. There was a depth to her, a silent desire to be heard, that intrigued him more than he was willing to admit. One night, Eduardo found Isabella's sketchbook carelessly left on the living room table. He was struck by the lines, the creativity, the passion that those pages conveyed. It was as if, for the first time, he saw who Isabella really was. The next morning, in a gesture that surprised even him, he complimented her work. "You have talent, Isabella. Have you ever thought about showing it to someone?" She was disconcerted, but that little comment sparked something in both of them. From that day on, Eduardo began to make small changes. He began to ask more about Isabella's interests, to listen with genuine curiosity when she talked about design and art. She, initially suspicious, gradually began to let her guard down. There was something new about him, a knowledge that had not existed before. Eduardo, for the first time, seemed to be there not only as a business partner, but as someone interested in getting to know the woman he was married to. It was not an easy or quick process. Eduardo was a man of ingrained habits, and change came with planned effort. He began to reflect on what really mattered in life. "What's the point of all this money and influence if my wife is a stranger to me?" he thought. These questions led him to reevaluate not only his marriage, but also who he wanted to be. Little by little, he let go of his impeccable posture and began to show vulnerability. In a moment that marked Eduardo's transformation, he specified a surprise visit to an art gallery. "I thought you might like to see this," he said, handing Isabella an invitation. She was speechless. It was the first time he had genuinely done something for her, without ulterior motives. The gallery was small, but full of pieces that dialogued with Isabella's own drawings. It was a small gesture, but loaded with meaning. Eduardo also began to participate more in company meetings, but this time he listened attentively to Isabella's ideas. In one of these meetings, he suggested that the company create a line signed by her. Isabella's eyes filled with surprise and gratitude. He didn't just support her, he believed in her. It was at that moment that she discovered that Eduardo was changing, that he was willing to be more than just a strategic partner. Eduardo's transformation brought a new balance to their marriage. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but there was something different: empathy. He began to understand that love isn't born only from passion, but also from respect and the effort to connect. Isabella, in turn, began to see Eduardo in a different light, as someone who was willing to walk alongside her, not just control her. But there were still challenges to be overcome, and the future remained uncertain. The dynamic between Isabella and Eduardo began to change transparently. The marriage, which had previously been an emotional prison, began to have the contours of a partnership. Together, they began to review the company's rumors, with Isabella bringing her innovative ideas for furniture design and Eduardo using his political skills to regain the trust of investors. For the first time, they were working as a team, and this brought a new sense of purpose to both of them. Isabella, previously reserved, began to feel more confident presenting her ideas. With Eduardo's support, she launched a line of furniture that combined art and functionality, something completely new for the company. The project was an immediate success, attracting a young and sophisticated audience. Eduardo, who was initially skeptical about the idea solution, found out when he saw the sales figures rising. "I knew you were talented, but this is extraordinary," he said, confirming his wife's merit. Parallel to their success at work, Isabella and Eduardo began to share more personal moments. Conversations that were once cold and formal have now become intimate and honest. One night, while they were reviewing a new project, Eduardo confided, "I never thought it would be possible to admire someone the way I admire you now." Isabella laughed, disconcerted, but realized that the words were genuine. Little by little, a new type of connection began to form between them. The personal growth of both was evident. Eduardo, previously so rigid, learned to value Isabella's creativity and sensitivity. He began to see the world more openly, allowing his wife's ideas to inspire him. On the other hand, Isabella learned to deal with business difficulties, developing a strength she didn't know she possessed. Together, they were becoming better versions of themselves, shaped by the experiences they shared. Despite the progress, not everything was easy. The company's challenges continued, and there were days when the weight of responsibilities seemed unbearable. But in those moments, they supported each other. Eduardo, for example, began accompanying Isabella on her morning walks, a habit she cultivated to clear her mind. "What are we going to do with this contract?" he asked, to which she replied, "The answer will come, we just need to calm down." And so, they forcibly found themselves in each other. Isabella's success brought renewal to the company, but it also attracted attention and criticism. Some members of high society questioned whether Eduardo had lost his leadership position. He, however, always defended Isabella. "It's not about who's in charge, it's about what we're building together," he said, without hesitation. This stance brought him even closer to Isabella, who, for the first time, felt that she had a true ally. Over time, the partnership between them stopped being just strategic and became something deeper. There was now a mutual respect that transformed every interaction. Eduardo and Isabella realized that they were writing a new story, not only for the company, but for themselves. However, the lessons learned along the way were still put to the test, as the biggest challenges were just beginning. As time passed, Isabella began to see her sacrifice from a new perspective. Marriage, which felt like a prison, proved to be an opportunity for growth and transformation. The company was saved, but more than that, she found in Eduardo a partner who supported her and valued her ideas. Bottomless, Isabella remembers that the sacrifices they made had generated fruits that were beyond the material. The family's wealth now included something intangible: togetherness. The furniture factory became a symbol of renewal. With the line signed by Isabella, a company not only survived, but prospered. It was as if the essence of his passion had given new life to the family legacy. The furniture they produce now tells stories, mixing tradition and innovation. And, while the brand grows stronger, Isabella also grows stronger as a woman and professional. That young woman who dreamed of studying in Paris was now creating her own revolution in the heart of the family empire. Joaquin, who once believed that saving the company depended on strategic alliances, began to understand that the true engine of success was love and commitment. He watched Isabella and Eduardo working together and felt a silent pride. Despite his difficult decisions, he finally recognizes that family strength comes from the ability to reinvent itself, even in adversity. In one conversation, he told Isabella, "I discovered that I was teaching you something, but in fact, you were the one who taught me." Eduardo, in turn, also redefined his view of sacrifices. He saw that loving someone was more than just being there. It was about building together, sharing fears and celebrating victories. He became a more conscious, more attentive man, willing to fight for what really mattered. His transformation did not go unnoticed. Isabella, who previously saw him as a stranger, now saw him as a true companion, someone she could trust. The meaning of family was expanding. It wasn't just about the name they carried or the money they had, but about the choices they made together. Isabella began to value simple moments: dinners at home, conversations in the evening, the spontaneous laughter that came even on difficult days. She saw that while she was fighting to save the company, she was actually building a new foundation for her family. A stronger foundation, based on love and understanding. Isabella also allowed herself to dream again. Even without Paris, she found a way to express her creativity, and this brought her new peace. Her drawings now come to life, adorning rooms and offices around the world. The flame that once seemed to be extinguished now burned brighter than ever. "I discovered that I needed to escape to find my place, but in truth, I only believed that it was already here," she recalled. And so, Isabella's sacrifice stopped being a burden and became a learning experience. She understood that loving her family did not mean nullifying herself, but finding ways to unite what seemed impossible. However, her journey was not over yet. New challenges were emerging, and she knew that the strength they would build together would be essential to face the future. After all, with every sacrifice there is a new beginning, and Isabella was ready for whatever came. Now that you've seen how sacrifice can shape lives and transform relationships, I want to ask you a question. Are you clear about the price you're paying for your sacrifices? Are you giving up your family's name or using these difficult decisions as a foundation for something greater? Isabella's story shows us that it is possible to transform your life into purpose, but this requires courage, wisdom, and, above all, action. If you're at a crossroads, where the challenges seem greater than your strength, remember, every sacrifice has a hidden meaning, and the key to discovering it lies in your choices. What can you do today to unite your dreams with the love for your family? Maybe it's time to make the decision you've been putting off or to see your sacrifices from a new perspective. What will you do differently? If this reflection is for you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, we continue exploring these deep questions so that you can find not only answers, but also inspiration to transform your life and your story. See you in the next video.